Hi, and welcome to Tremco Live, where we're socially distanced, but technically connected. This is our opportunity to reach out every Friday to talk to you about your design challenges and to talk about construction trends. I am Marcy Tyler, one of your hosts, and I'm the Director of Building Science for Tremco. And
I am Paul Hoogenboom. I'm the President of the Tremco Construction Products Group, Marcy. A great collection of brands, companies all over the world.
Exactly. We're very proud to be able to be here every Friday with all of you, and we usually talk about the weather.
Yeah, but it's boring now.
It is.
Sunny for week after week.
It must be boring for those people in Florida that just have sun all the time. Yeah. Anyway, yes, it looks like it might rain. It looked a little dark.
But it's been a great week.
Yeah.
Cool at night.
Yeah.
80 during the day. Sunshine. Good for construction.
Very good. Very good construction weather. So we're excited to, as I mentioned, be here presenting to all of you guys today. We've got a lot of great new content that we are preparing, that we're working on. Continue to let us know what's interesting to you, what you want to hear more about, and let us know if you have a case study you want us to feature, a customer you want to feature. If you are one of our customers and there's something you would like to share, keep that information coming to us because we absolutely appreciate that. Last week, Paul, our first slide showed some of our new collateral. So I chose two new pieces to feature today. One is our new video all about that Tremco Construction Products Group, our whole brand overview video. And then another piece that starts to go in to show how we have the sum of all the parts, right, of construction.
I just saw that graphic for the first time today.
Yeah.
I think it's really well done.
Yeah. We've got a great staff of individuals I know have been working really hard on all this information. So, and be able to provide it to us, I want to definitely feature it.
Yeah, I mean, we do so much, but then how do you convey that simply? So I really like that one up on the right there. It's very well done.
Very well done, very simple, exactly. So this week's episode of Tremco Live is going to be focused on the parking garage. So as we always say, we could take a deep dive into so many different things. And fortunately for me, I think there's a lot of content we'll be able to share on a regular basis because I know that's where we want, what we want to be able to do.
Yeah, and parking garages for me, the phrase that always comes to mind as I was educated on several years ago in parking garages, Marcy, time is money.
Time is definitely money. That is definitely true. So I have an apology for everybody watching and to Paul, is I had mentioned that we were going to talk about parking garages and stadiums. But we have so much great stadium work, so many different elements of stadiums. This is just a teaser of what we're going to provide in a future broadcast. So we're not going to go into detail this time. But lots of great things that are pretty noteworthy up there on that screen.
Yeah, I think, Marcy, the last couple of years, explosion of work in all kinds of stadiums. And I never knew there were so many.
Yes.
Like we did a little bit of research and there were over 4,000, I think, hockey arenas just in Canada.
Oh my God, well, that makes sense, but I didn't realize that many. That's a lot. That's a lot. I wonder, we should do the math on the population versus the hockey arenas.
Yeah,
how many hockey arenas is
there's
that?
an awful lot of arenas, and it's a great matchup for our restoration capabilities because so many of them were built 20, 30 years ago, and they're all kind of hitting that point of what should they do. So,
Exactly.
All right, so is that next week?
Not next week.
Okay.
It's a future segment. Next week, we're going to go right onto the roof, which we could talk about some of these, but we got a special program we're putting together for next week for roofs.
We'll have to wait for stadium.
Yeah, you're going to have to wait for stadiums. So on this one, as we mentioned, we wanted to focus on parking garages. So this one is where we're just gathered a bunch of information that you can find on the internet, of course, or from industry partners. So I liked to Google, as I did last week, about the number of buildings. So I Googled the number of parking garages, and this is old. It's from 2014, so we need that updated. Yeah. But it said 40,000. So I bet there's definitely more than that.
Yeah. So. Now that's way more than the hockey arenas in Canada.
That's way more than the hockey arenas.
But it's, I guess, Marcy, it's rare to have a major, we'll call it building or facility without an adjacent parking garage or parking structure. What we're seeing now, more parking's embedded actually in the actual facility themselves.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely evolving and changing, and then also just very prevalent in the industry to see those. Some noteworthy things as we're looking up here, Parkopedia is actually the North American Parking Index. So that's probably where I'd find out how many parking garages there are. They did put some information together, and Melissa Wiley from Biz Women, she's a Biz Women reporter. She did an article back in April of 2018 on the cost of parking. So the cost of parking, she says, may surprise you. And the top three, as you probably could assume, is New York, Chicago, and Boston. The pricing there listed, which did come from Parkopedia as her reference in that article. But as you said, time, for parking.
Yeah, for every period of time that a parking spot's not available, there you see the click rate.
Yes, exactly.
It adds up quickly.
It can very
and
much
it's a huge inconvenience, right, in terms of the people being able to access the area or the facility that the parking garage is supporting.
Yes, absolutely, for retail, for residential, and then just access.
Or critical care, yeah.
Oh my gosh, critical care is huge. And then there is industry associations obviously associated with, so I just mentioned a few there. We have the National Parking Association and the International Parking and Mobility Institute. They have a lot of great information and resources on their websites. And of course, I wanted to mention the Sealant Waterproofing and Restoration Institute, who has a lot of great information on their website. We are a proud member of that organization. What I really love about that organization, it is very much so contractor focused, but it's also that Trinity effect. So it's contractor focused, but they know how important that partnership is with the consultant and with the manufacturer. So we really do really much so enjoy being a part of that, where they have training programs and product validation, and they do have a meeting coming up in November, fingers crossed, that we'll be able to go.
Terrific.
But very excited. So lots of resources out there. There's a lot, as I mentioned, that we could talk about in parking garages and restoration, which is why stadiums will be a future segment. So as we go into that, we always like to look at, what is it that Tremco can do for our customers? And in this case, lots of things. We've got expansion joints. We've got coatings. We've got the coatings for the walls as well as for the drive lanes. And one thing I think people tend to maybe overlook is some of your waterproofing that we can do too. In terms of planters, there's a huge opportunity for planters when we look at parking garage restoration as a whole.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I think we're seeing some more of is often the first or the second floor of a parking structure is fully occupied space. So the need for, we'll call it that parking deck, to actually, be a roof, if you will, or be fully waterproofed and not permit air, moisture, or thermal.
Right.
So we're seeing some more of that, especially in dense urban environments.
Right. I spoke with Jamie Gill. He mentioned a project that he worked on, Johns Hopkins, where it was a roof that was just that. It was a parking area that was over occupied space.
Yeah, that was a critical care. That was emergency care.
Yeah.
So they're pretty sensitive environment.
Yeah. Exactly. And then when we add in our Euclid partner as well, we've got a lot of different patch and repair materials that we can provide as a whole holistic approach.
Yep.
And this slide I like here, and a lot of this information in these slides were given to me by J.V. Snyder. He presented on parking garage restoration at our sales meeting back in September. So he was like, hey, Marks, I got a lot of information, and he sent it to me. So thank you, J.V. Snyder, for all of that. And I love this slide here. So the marketing communications team worked directly with Euclid and a lot of our reps to put together this image, and then all the different bubbles represent those opportunities of things that we can work on with our Euclid partner and the Tremco CPG, which includes the Drive It, the Will Seal, and the Tremco products.
Yeah, another thing, I don't see that on a call out here, Marcy, but that's all right. It's maybe a future segment. It's our fiber grade sister company. So it's really all of the different, we'll call it railing type systems. Or different walkways, things of that nature. So we're doing a lot more work with fiber grade, great partnership with them up on the roof. And I see a lot of things going on in this building.
Yep, we can add that in for sure.
Might be a great fit. And the other thing we see a lot of, I see decorative coatings. We see a lot of people going to panelized systems now, right? So I think we've addressed that. And the Drive It type.
Yeah, the Federalite, the Federalite panel. So so whether you need a decorative coating for that existing concrete, or if you want to go ahead and use a panel, then we have that, which we talked about last week. So lots of opportunities there. And I think Paul challenged last week, what is it that you have as a restoration need? Let us know, because we probably have something for it. If not from the Tremco CPG, but some of the other companies, as we featured Stoneheart on one of the beginning slides.
Probably almost everybody in RPM is a partner of ours in one way or another, Marcy. It's pretty cool.
It is. It's great. So as we start to look at some specific systems, this is one that we wanted to feature today from General Caulking and Coatings. This is their Palm Beach County Convention parking garage that they did a few years back, utilizing our Volcom systems, our Volcom polyurethane system. So this is where they utilize that type of system. So some great pictures there. We feature this project in our traffic coatings brochure. So if you want to know more about our traffic coatings, we've got a great brochure that you can get from our website on just that. So lots of different options for not only vehicular, but pedestrian and specialty coatings as well.
I like the decorative aspect too. I think we're seeing a lot more of that, where it's not just restoration, but with a little bit of thought, it can be really pleasing aesthetically.
Absolutely. Interesting thing about this project, we did do some aesthetically pleasing coating options, right? But this was before we partnered. Before Dryvit and Will Seal were part of the CPG. So now that they are, we have even more opportunities. So as we look for future work with our customers, we will be able to provide them even more. So it's pretty exciting that we're able to do that. And then I love this picture here as we start to talk about options and durability, right? So as you look at having something that needs to be durable, like in a helical ramp or in a ticket spitter area, that's where we have that Volcom extreme wear system, which is our Puma.
Yeah, and I think these are the most acute areas, Marcy, because these are really the choke points of a facility. So the ability, what we call return to service, and being able to do that really, really fast.
Yeah.
You're going to share, I think, a few things with us today about just how fast we can do that.
We can do things pretty fast. Yes, we will be sharing that. So, and one of our previous broadcasts, we did focus on Puma and that ability to turn things around very quickly. So check that out as well, but we'll be talking about it. Yeah. Certainly. So what I like to say when you think of that extreme wear system, something like a turn lane or a ticket spitter is really where you need that durability. And then if it's a urgent care facility or a place that you can't afford to shut it down, that's when you're going to want to utilize that. So something you can turn around in hours versus days.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is we can dial up the slip resistance to whatever you need in terms of really giving you that grip that you're looking for, depending on the slope and the angle and things of that nature. But we can go very, very aggressive.
Very aggressive, so much that if you pick a certain system, it can even handle snowplows, yeah. Which is important for an area like Cleveland. Yeah. So, not today, but yeah. Most of the time we are worried about
half the year. Yeah, at least half the year we care about snowplows.
Exactly. Yeah. So, once again, thank you, JB, for these photos. This next project here is Orlando Health. These pictures were provided by Liz Bailey, so thank you, Liz, for sending these to me, which was from a presentation at our national sales meeting, I think, the year before. So hot topics, obviously, from a sales meeting perspective. And what I really love about this opportunity here is that it really did bring the Tremco Roofing and Tremco Commercial Sealants partnership together to provide this opportunity to really help with this Orlando Health parking garage. Not looking good there in that top picture.
What's the 210, Marcy?
The 210 is a reminder for me to say this project was about 210,000 square feet.
Wow. So
lots of concrete that was never coated. So this is in Orlando, and look at that wear. That is 20 years of wear. So if we looked at all these pictures, you would see exposed rebar, you would see spalling, you would see spider cracking, you would see a lot that needed to be repaired on this project. So that partnership came together. Steve Gralla is our technical rep that was out on site, helping out, trying to figure out what was the right way to repair. Obviously, Euclid partnerships there, our coastal construction products, and then of course Western specialty contractors to do the work. There was all hands on deck when it came to figuring out a solution for this project. So 20 years, 210,000 square feet, and I love, as always, that the before and after photos. So, pretty cool. So So with that, we will now be going on to our guests for today. So we're pretty excited to be able to have a guest that his work is focused in providing those parking solutions. So Mark Santos, welcome to Tremco Live.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much.
So we were knocking a little bit of Florida there. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I felt that, Mark.
I
had to pull the shades down a little bit so that the sun doesn't come in too much here. And you know, the view of the ocean to my right, I'll keep the camera focused this way.
Yeah, exactly.
Just really wanted to thank you, Paul and Marcy, and a shout out to Darrell Lane down here in Florida for the outreach and being a part of this live session. And it was a very easy way to get plugged in because the slides that you guys just had shown were right about. But as I was writing a few things, I mean, Paul, you kind of hit it right there, nail on the head with time is money. There's not a lot of downtime in some of these facilities that owners can afford to lose, and that equates to, not just construction costs, but the more that either a parking garage or a surface lot needs to be displaced, that's money out of the owner's pocket that is adding up daily. And then the other thing before I really kind of jump into it is, I think we might have some more synergies. Our Washington, D.C. office has done a lot of work at Johns Hopkins, so I think we were together in installing that Puma system on that ramp. So that was another project manager in our DC office. Her name is Shannon Bentz, but that's just a little aside that I picked up as you guys were doing a great introduction on those slides. So I just have a few slides here that I'd like to share with the group. And again, thanks for everyone for participating. A little bit about my experience. Again, Mark Santos with Desmond. I'm a practice leader here in our Fort Lauderdale office. As I briefly mentioned, parking is near and dear to my heart. I've been actually involved in the industry for 20 years. The first half of that was actually in the Northeast, born and raised in Philadelphia. So I think I remember what a snowplow is, but the last 10 years have been down here in Florida. So we deal with a different kind of salt, airborne and, things close to the beach versus, road salts. I also enjoy staying involved in the practice. I currently serve as past president of the Florida Parking and Transportation Association, a great organization down here. And you already had mentioned it, IPMI, active member and serve on a few committees for them too. So a little bit about Desmond. As you can kind of see from the small map there, we have 9 offices, a little bit centered in the Northeast, New York, Boston, DC, making our way west to Cleveland, Chicago, and then as far west as Denver. And then of course, as I mentioned, down here in South Florida in Fort Lauderdale. Just a few things about us, we are parking specialists. So we've completed actually over 5,000 parking related projects, and pleased to say that nearly 2,000 of them are restoration related. Ourselves, our makeup, we're comprised of about 100 associates, and we're divided into parking specialists, architects, structural engineers, parking consultants and planners, and then of course, no surprise, for the intent of this discussion, restoration engineers. So on the right-hand side, and I'm not going to read all the bullets, but those are just a few of the services that probably many folks on this session are familiar with regards to restoration, evaluating facilities, assessing them, making recommendations, having any structural evaluations and repairs, working along with folks like Tremco and a lot of waterproofing contractors for cost estimating and budgeting, and then of course, carrying it through the construction phase.
Perfect. We have a question coming in from our audience, if you wouldn't mind answering it. They were asking, obviously with the different locations that you have throughout the U.S. and coming from Philadelphia, is there something moving to the Florida market that was a big difference in the parking garage market that you noticed?
Well, I mean, in my particular case, it happened to be internal with the company that I was with at the time. But the answer is yes, because that particular company and currently Desmond, we see a tremendous amount of growth in Florida. Pandemic aside, there's more people coming in than leaving, and a lot of folks taking up more residence in Florida. So I think if I'm answering it correctly, there's both on the new design, which got slowed down a little bit here in the past few months, but definitely on the assessment, evaluation, and restoration side, I would consider Florida, in particular South Florida, which is where we are, kind of a hot market for some of that work.
The other question that's coming in is concrete differences, right? So I think what we're even seeing is, depending on the location, you can see some differences in concrete as well.
Yes, so I mean, I think briefly on that, and I'll kind of answer in a couple different ways. But I guess the first thing is a lot with concrete mixes. We're, now in Florida, we're not as, how can I say it, as much of a stickler with air entrainment. For the freeze thaw, I don't, here freeze thaw is like anything under 70 degrees, which isn't really freezing. But for those in actually those climates, air entrainment is a big component, whether it's 5 or 6%, to have allow the concrete and have the pores to allow it to breathe and freeze thaw is very important. But on the same token, it's actually a lot of similarity. We're still dealing with salts, it's just in a different way. So while we may not get as many floor spalls, in certain cases with road salts and tires tracking them in, the airborne salts down here also relate to, the conduit and to all the metal connections, things that may not be seeing water directly. So while it's a little bit different, there's definitely still some Commonality to salts.
Perfect. And we have one more question, sorry. Your picture on your slide on the lower right, they wanted you to explain what's going on there.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so this is a picture, actually what's happening is there's some spalling around this construction joint. So typically construction joint or control joint is meant to, in fact, what it says, control cracking. But I guess in this particular case, the slab got a little bit out of hand and the control joint wasn't close enough. So the gentleman that you see there is actually using a little bit of a hammer drill to remove loose concrete. That's identified with something called a chain drag, where you literally kind of drag a modified chain along the surface of the concrete to hear any hollow sounds, which will help indicate, the extent of repair. So that's what he's doing. He's actually demolishing. Actually, it was a previous patch that didn't hold. So he's about to demolish it, and then we're gonna, repair it new with high strength mortar.
Perfect. Very good. The next slide.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Marcy.
Okay, perfect.
In collaboration with Tremco, just some of the things Paul and Marcy, you guys had mentioned that, I didn't really have it in my notes, but I thought I'd bring it up is, what's interesting about garages, while they might seem pretty straightforward and, hey, off the shelf kind of thing at first, they've kept me pretty busy for the past 2 decades, which is a little bit hard to say. But garages are interesting because they're kind of a combination of a building and a bridge. We follow the building code, yet we are housing and storing, moving parts. So it's a little bit of, best of both worlds there. But also, the challenging thing with parking garages is whether it's in new design or restoration is, what you see is what you get, meaning this is the finished product. Outside of maybe painting the ceilings or columns or deck coatings on the floor, any work that's done and the workmanship that is there is, very evident. So I know a lot of the builders and the restoration contractors take a lot of pride in making sure that what's installed is, not just meeting the demands and the needs, but, is also aesthetically pleasing.
Exactly. So I think that's where we like to focus a lot on education and hands-on training of our customers, so that we have that qualified applicator. Is there a resource? Sorry, another question. Is there a resource for industry education that you would recommend as your 20 years of experience?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot, but I would probably say probably the number one resource I use more often than not is the American Concrete Institute, ACI. They have a guideline. It's not a code, but it's a guideline called ACI 362, which is for the durability for the design and construction of parking garages. So it's a very detailed document, but it is, a great read when you need it. But it's definitely something that is important for folks that either maintain garages, own them, or actually, to be honest, that help repair them too, because one of the critical things there is it helps list different types of durability zones. So if you're, heavily, used with road salts, or if you're within a half mile of the beach, or unless you're in the middle of, the country where you're not really subject to salts, it has different levels of durability recommendations per construction type. So whether it's cast in place, conventional, or PT, or precast, it has a lot of great information there. That would be probably the #1 resource I would recommend.
Perfect. Right along those lines, we got a question in where they're asking, offhand, is it more deteriorating in a hot climate or in a cold climate for concrete?
I guess I would probably say it's in a hot climate, it's more throughout the entire year. Where things are, it's more steady throughout the year. But from what I recall, in the Northeast is, as soon as there's winter and then it starts to warm up is when there's a lot of potholes, there's a lot of spalling, there's a lot of things that are evident. And I remember that now because, we had a window of doing a lot of our assessments. We had to do a lot of the assessments in the cold so that, come spring, that the bids were out and the restoration folks could actually do the work in the summer, whether it was a college campus, which has a lesser demand in the summer. So I remember doing a few of those cold assessments, in January, February. But it really, I think it's just kind of heavier at certain times. But in the Florida region, at least, I would say it's a pretty consistent means of repairs. The only thing I would say is I try to not do the assessments, of top levels of garages in August. That's probably what I
Yes, the opposite effect there. So you're featured 2 projects here. So one of the questions was there do you have a big challenge for each of them? And then, what was that solution?
Sure. Yeah. So this was actually a couple of recent projects down here in South Florida that we were able to collaborate with Tremco and also General Caulking. Before I jump into this, what I would say is, the 2 owners had, I don't want to say 2 different approaches. I think they had 2 different budgets. The top string is for a college in downtown Miami where, it took them several years to build up the budget to repair 4 of their garages on 4 of their campuses, meaning that it ultimately, was a lot more expensive because they were not able to have the funds to kind of do it more regular. And then the project at the bottom, Galleria Mall, which is actually close here in Fort Lauderdale, that particular client has probably done a major restoration of their 4 garages every 3 to 5 years. So they're very proactive, and while they might do it more often, the extent of that work is much less than the top one. But as far as relevance, and I think, Paul, you mentioned this earlier, the Miami-Dade College at the top, one of the big parts of that was there was active space on the ground floor of this 11-story garage. And by active space, I mean there was a bookstore, classrooms, a fitness center, some faculty offices. So we waterproofed or re-deck coated with the Tremco Volcom the 2nd floor, obviously to help protect what was going on downstairs with minimal impacts to those uses. And that was a cast in place post tension structure, which is, probably maybe 2 miles from saltwater. So that was one of the reasons why a post tension structure was selected. And that garage was about. The project at the bottom is the Galleria Mall, as I mentioned, in Fort Lauderdale. And I guess one of the things here is, Marcy, I thought I had a good number to show until a few slides ago you showed me up. The Tremco product was applied about 150,000 square feet, so I think I just got put in my place with the 210.
Oh, shoot.
But that was actually, as you can see on the bottom right, it was on the top floor of what they call the lime garage. And because it was so large, it was actually done in 8 different phases to put that deck coating down. Yep. So, but for the most part, both of these, I would say, is each of the clients, ended up with the same result, but one that has a more regular defined budget, they're able to kind of chip away every year, versus those that kind of go up and down, and then it kind of builds up, over time.
Yeah. So having that maintenance program or regular budget to do these things is the difference there.
Yeah, but I thought it was good how Mark shared on the first one, even though they had maybe not maintained as regular, he found a way to get them there over a period of years, right? It's always it's always key that you got to work with the budget constraints.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that just takes a real partnership to do that.
Another question that came in was about compatibility. So one of the big things we always like to say at Tremco is, let us take on that liability. I said reliable and be reliable by taking the compatibility on, right? So obviously we always like that single source approach. So how do you guys handle that when it ends up being two different manufacturers?
So I mean, that's a great question, because a lot of the times, you might be thinking it might be waterproofing related, and sealers and sealants and deck coating, and obviously if it's under the same manufacturer, that's a no-brainer. But if it's determined that there are different lines or different products, we will ask both manufacturers to really kind of that we all touch base and make sure we're all seeing the same thing, so that I hate to say there's no finger pointing, but that we all go into something knowing what we're getting into. So we do ask for backup, we do ask for coordination, and make sure that, again, moisture level content, might be different from manufacturer A versus manufacturer B. Curing conditions, we want to make sure we're all seeing the same thing. But I'll also add to that, because as important as waterproofing is, a lot of the times we also need to make sure that the striping is also compatible. And is also put down at the right time. So in addition to just waterproofing, some of the finishes and pieces of those nature, we want to make sure that they're also compatible.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
To make sure, I wouldn't think of that, but yeah, that makes sense too. Make sure.
Well, the only reason I think about it is because when you're walking a job and you see it peeling, then you remember that.
Yeah. Right. That's the case, right? We learn a lot from those don'ts.
Yeah.
For sure. So yeah, I think we can hit the last slide, Marcy.
Sure.
So this is a little bit of taking a step back from the nuts and bolts and rolling up the sleeves. And as I mentioned, Desmond is a part of the parking industry. So while we do a lot of new design work and restoration, we also do a lot of planning and studies. And just as a little bit of food for thought, I've been listening to and participating in a bunch of different webinars. Is the parking demand. Right, as offices begin to open back up and restaurants, it obviously, like literally overnight, it went down to almost nothing. And some of the stats that you can read there is, and through Smarking, which is a great parking website and a lot of data collection, they've measured as low as 10% of that parking demand from last year at the same time. You guys can remember I think we're about 3 months almost to the date when things started shutting down and people were locked at home and don't go anywhere. So it's just crazy to see something happen overnight. Especially that affects not just our nation, but globally. So one of the big questions that we're dealing with in the industry is does that mean parking demand is going to go down? Does that mean garages are going to be used less? Does that mean there's going to be no more new parking garages, right? And obviously I'm being a little bit an extremist there of going from one end of the spectrum to the other. But some interesting things we've heard are, there actually maybe there is either a net zero effect, or some folks are talking about possibly a parking demand increase because, in those locations where mass transit is heavily used upon, some folks may not rely on that, and they may increase their single occupancy vehicle cars. So it's an interesting debate. I'll just knock on South Florida a little bit because we don't really have a transit system here, and not only does everybody love their single occupancy cars, they love their multiple cars. So that was just more of a global discussion, but it's definitely something that's interesting because my immediate thought was, parking demand is going to go down, but maybe not so fast. And we've also been looking at some stats, even air travel. I think it's different now, especially every day that it begins to ramp up. And while I haven't flown since the lockdown, a lot of contacts and friends, they're beginning to open up and jump on some flights, even this past weekend, or planning something for the 4th of July. So I think that 5% from last year is rising, and I think the question is just at what rate. But why am I bringing this up? And I think it really comes down to that third bullet is, some discussions that the owners are looking at are, if I have an empty garage, what can I do with it? Can I use it for something else? Can I adapt it? And that's a little bit more difficult for existing garages that are designed for a lower load, or they have sloped floors and there's ramps everywhere. It's not as conducive. But a lot of especially on the municipality end, one of our clients in the city of Miami Beach are very progressive in the sense that any new parking structure or mixed-use complex, they are requiring that there is a kind of a provision for garage adaptive reuse, so that some of the parking floors could be converted to resident or office or something of that nature, and allowing the structure to have that capacity, so that, you know, in the future, if something were to be again readapted, there'd be minimal infrastructure updates. You know, the foundations would be sized appropriately, the columns would be. You might have to rip out some floors and put in new ones, but that's you know, some of the discussion we're having as well with, you know, what happens if some of these garages go you know, a little bit less used than normal.
Wow, that's very interesting. I never thought about that, of the adaptive use.
Yeah, Mark, can you just expand for our last couple of minutes on that? You talked about municipalities that were starting to maybe require or focus on adaptive reuse. Can you just maybe close on that a little bit for us? Sure,
absolutely. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a topic that is I think, you know, well discussed around in the industry, but not many folks are, I don't want to say enforcing or implementing it, because it is a hard thing to come down to, in the sense of, you know, we're struggling with what's going to happen, you know, next week or next month. Who knows what's going to happen in 5, 10, 15 years. So while it is ultimately, you know, something that, you know, does have cost implications, I think just a recommendation, and that I would add, is, you know, it's definitely worth a discussion. You know, for early on, for planning purposes, is that something that a study should be done to look at the capacity? Is that something that, you know, in a few years, should there be a budget to look at something that down the line in the capital improvements? So my closing thought would be, I think it's just worth a discussion at this point. I mean, at this point in time, we're all trying to figure out what tomorrow means, but I think that adaptive reuse could be an important part of it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I can speak for my son, who works in the travel industry out of Tampa, Florida. He hopes the air travel increases. But he mentioned that JetBlue just opened up a new segment to Tampa from, I can't remember where to, but so there's definitely some increase there.
I think people are always going to want to go to Florida, Marcy.
That's true. That's true. That is very true. Mark, just so you know, questions are continuing to pour in, so I will be following up with you with all these questions so that we can reach back out to everybody. I really want to thank you. Thank you, Darrell Lane, for connecting us with Mark. Thank you so much for being able to come on the broadcast today. It's very helpful. Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to our audience. And we'll see you next Friday on our next broadcast. Marcy, did you already say what we're doing? Did I forget?
I did not. We're focusing on the top of the building.
Okay.
The roof.
All right.
So next week, the roof.
Cool.
Thank you.
See you next week. Thank you.